This past weekend, World Athletics came up with their standards for the 2023 World Championship, and people are pissed. But this was World Athletics' goal all along. This past year, World Athletics announced that their goal is to have a 50-50 split when it comes to qualifying for both the Olympics and the World Championships. They say they want to have a 50-50 split of people that qualify based off of standard as well as based off of world ranking. So this means that the world standards are going to continue to increase so they can reach that split. For example, let's take a look at the men's 100. For the men's 100, they have 56 athletes that qualify. So that means to have a 50-50 split, you would need 25 athletes to qualify based off of world ranking and 25 athletes to qualify based on world standard. They currently just moved the number 10.00. And if we take a look at this previous year's rankings, for 30 athletes that qualified or reached a 10.00 this calendar year, which means they're pretty close right now with having a 50-50 split. Now, a lot of people are up in arms because there's not much knowledge on how athletes qualify based on world ranking. The standard is simple. If you run the time that you have to run, you make the team. World rankings is not like that. World rankings is based off of your results, your placement, and the tier of the meet. So not only do you have to run fast, you also have to place high, and you have to do it at the right meet. Now, what are the right meets, you might ask? Well, there are multiple tiers for how a meet gets qualified. There are tier A, B, C, D, E, and F. A tier would be your major senior championships that you can have, and each nation is able to have one national senior championship hit the standard. Then they progressively go down, so whether it be other Diamond League events, you would see other Continental Tour events, you'd see national championships for the college, and then other meets that are continuing to go lower and lower. So what they're trying to do is not only allow athletes to just run one race, have a good time, and then not run the rest of the year. They want athletes to compete more and compete in the events that they want them to compete in. So it's forcing these professional athletes to compete more in these events that the World Athletics deems as more important. A lot of athletes that are at least in the United States are going to have to be going more to meets that are overseas, as many of these meets are competed in Europe, Asia, or Africa. So we're going to be seeing a lot less of the athletes that you may know and love here in the United States, as they're going to be competing more in Europe in order to hit these standards, because the regular entry standards have gone to being pretty insanely high. They're looking to get that number to be right around that 30 or 28 mark. So for C, there will be more increases of the World Championship standard, because they're trying to make it more of that 50-50 split. And all of them right now are hovering right around that 35 range. That means, like we said, athletes are going to have to focus more on world rankings. So they're trying to get athletes to compete more, which I'm a fan of. I think that athletes should be competing more and more consistently. I would like for there to be a consistent schedule that athletes know they are going to be in, so fans can know when their favorite athletes will be running. What I'm not a fan of is the fact that many of these meets are not here in the United States. So what I would hope for is not to change the system so that these meets that are in Europe are getting worse. I think we need to make there be a better product here in the United States. This affects the college athletes and the professional athletes very, very differently. If you're a professional athlete, it's a lot easier to go over to Europe or to go over to these Continental Tour or the Diamond League meets, because that's what your job is. You're competing in these competitions because you have this flexibility. You can compete in the meet you qualify in, and simple as that. For a college athlete, that's not really the case. So this hurts college athletes significantly. Like, this makes it so much more difficult for college athletes to compete, because if you look at the tier ranks that all of the college meets are, they're very, very low. So the SEC Championship, that's gonna be an F tier meet. Why? Because it's only college athletes that can compete in it. The anti-doping is very different in college than it is for the professionals. So that's why that tier meet is so much worse, even though the quality of that competition is going to be significantly higher than many of these professional meets that are going on, which is very strange to me, because it's not, the tiering is not based off of the competition of the meet or the competition of the event. It's just based off of what World Athletics deems as being an important race. So for example, you can have a stacked 100-meter final in the SEC Championship. It can be everyone in that final is running sub 10. but it doesn't qualify as the same as a continental tour, which might have people running a 10-1 or 10-2 in there because World Athletics deemed that that is a higher tier than an NCAA meet. And so it doesn't make much sense. It would make more sense if the tiered systems had some flexibility to it, where, hey, if you are a tier A meet, you have to have certain qualities when it comes to that meet. One, it's got to be able to be broadcasted worldwide. If you're a tier A meet, everyone in the world has to be able to see that. That's my opinion. You can't be a tier A meet if it's geo-locked to, just Europe with the Euro Championships, the Commonwealth Games, or if you're streaming on just some YouTube channel, if you're NACAC, like you need to have a major broadcast if you're going to be a tier A meet, because you're saying you're the best of the best, you have to have that. I would also say that in order to be considered a tier A meet, each of your events have to have a certain amount of athletes that are in that tier A tier. You can't just have this be an elite meet and then you have a whole bunch of people that are subpar professional athletes, because that doesn't make any sense, because then the meet might be tier A, but your actual meet is not. So in order to reach these standards, maybe it's like, hey, to be a tier A meet, you have to have at least 3 athletes that are in the top 10 or the top 20 of your meet to be considered a tier A. And then tier B, maybe it's you have to have at least 3 athletes in the top 25, or then D, top 50, whatever it might be for each event. You have to have something so there can be some checks and balances, because then otherwise these rankings mean nothing. And so we need to have something that does this to make it so we're getting some actually quality competitions and these rankings mean something. Because if you don't have this quality control, then the rankings mean nothing. The tier list doesn't have any meaning towards it. The NCAA championship, I believe, is a C-tiered meet. Even though it is one of the best competitions in the entire world, it is a C-tiered meet. And so these college athletes, they're not able to run in these diamond leagues. They're not able to run these pro meets. So they have to qualify based off standard, because they're not going to get in on world ranking. It's next to impossible to get in based off world ranking if you're a college athlete, because you're just not able to compete enough. And so this is really leaning towards a professional mindset of, hey, we want to have more pros qualifying here. And so we're going to start to see more college athletes get waned out of being able to compete in the World Championship, which means that I think that's going to have a negative effect on the NCAA. Like I said, I'm an NCAA track and field fan. I think college track and field is the most exciting version of track and field. But it stinks because now I think we're going to start seeing college athletes transitioning to the professional model quicker than they probably should, because they want to be able to get the money from the World Championship, because it's going to be next to impossible to get on that world ranking. And so if these athletes recognize that, they might move over to the pros a little bit quicker than they probably should, because you want to be able to qualify for the World Championships, because at the NCAA level, unless you hit the standard, it's just not going to happen. It's not just going to cut these fields completely. A lot of people are thinking, oh, there's no one that's going to qualify for the World Championship because these standards are so high. No, that's not the case. They have people qualifying on world standards, and people will do it. And we'll see how this changes and if this is a good idea in the future.